Hello, everybody. Welcome to the very first Think About It Thursdays of the year 2022. First of all, thank you for joining. I know people are still logging on, and we are just so happy to welcome you. If you're on Facebook, go ahead and click share. If you're on YouTube, send that link to your friends and family who would like to learn with us today, so they don't miss any of this. And of course, you can also watch it later. Welcome to Think About It Thursdays. I'm Cantor Lizzie Weiss here at Temple Emanuel, Beverly Hills. And in 2020, I started this program really as a way to try and escape the news, which was constantly about COVID. We did really fun things with fun facts about everything from sea animals to science facts. The goal was to just get a moment to escape. And I never could have imagined that I would have had the opportunity to talk to so many amazing guests. So now in 2022, this monthly show, I am so honored to sit with distinguished community leaders and doctors, clergy, educators, therapists, and more to really start to share techniques of how we can thrive and not just survive during these challenging times. So tonight, I am so excited to introduce you, although he needs no introduction, to the distinguished Dr. Julian Gold, so that we can answer some of the big questions that, believe it or not, we still have. What's going on with COVID? If you haven't gotten your booster, do I get a booster or not? A new variant? Will there be a new variant? So Dr. Julian Gold has some answers of some of your most just concerning questions. I am going to bring him on the screen so that you can actually look at his face while I give another brief bio. But Julian, welcome.
Well, thank you, Cantor. It's great to be here. It's great to see you, always.
Thank you for agreeing to be on here, for giving your time on this Thursday night, for agreeing to still talk about COVID. I know none of us could have guessed that we would still be here talking about COVID.
For sure.
For sure. So let me give a little bit of information about who Julian is, and then I am going to turn it over to you because you are our featured guest. So, I found out some things as I was researching your background today, which is that you moved here in 1994. And I thought that was interesting because that's when I moved to Beverly Hills. So we have that. We definitely have that in common. So Dr. Julian Gold came here from New York. He graduated from the NYU School of Medicine. He is a board certified anesthesiologist for over 40 years. You might have heard of a small hospital called Cedars-Sinai, where Julian was the co-chairman of the Department of Anesthesiology, co-managing partner of the General Anesthesia Specialist Partnership Medical Group from 1991 until 2019. I think you might have put me to sleep many times, actually, of my life.
That's my job.
That is your job, to put people to sleep. That's, I think, the first doctor's job that I learned. Exactly. And then even amidst all of your medical history, you then got very involved in Beverly Hills I'm blanking out on where I was. Team Beverly Hills, that's where we were. You got involved in the Beverly Hills Traffic and Parking Commission and the City Council, and then you were the mayor. And I should not forget to say that you are one of our most lovely congregants at Temple Emanuel Beverly Hills.
Okay.
And so with the medical history and the Beverly Hills leadership history, we welcome you to think about it Thursdays. So first of all, maybe you can fill in the blanks of what I missed in that very, very short bio I gave of who you are.
Well, if I did that, we'd be here all night. But the good news is I managed to bring my two lives together, both as an anesthesiologist and as a city council member. I think I do a pretty good job of putting people to sleep. Ba-bum-bum.
Ba-bum-bum. I know I needed to get that set up.
Ba-bum-bum. No, I mean, life is a remarkable thing, isn't it? We never know where it's going to take us. And I grew up in New York. My folks were from New York. Nobody had really ever been in California. And actually, I got out here. I lived in LA for a while, but I got out here in 1982. And if you had asked me as I was training, as I was growing up, you said to me one day, well, guess what? You're going to be the mayor of Beverly Hills, this nice Jewish boy from Forest Hills, Queens. I would have thought you were crazy. And so the path out here wasn't a straight line. It was a complicated line, but here it is, and it's great. It's wonderful, and it's been a wonderful journey. And I'm thankful every day for all the things that has brought me, including most recently our new granddaughter, which, is, oh my God, oh my God.
Oh my goodness. Everybody, this is your first granddaughter.
Well, we have one child, our daughter, who had her first child just now, December 17, Michaela Elizabeth, and she is just a bundle of joy. She's, my daughter's here tonight actually, and so I got to feed the baby, and it's amazing. It's amazing. For those of you who haven't tried it, I would strongly encourage it.
Try to be a grandparent.
Try and be a grandparent. Yeah, it's a good thing. It's a good
so
thing.
when we talked earlier this week, I said, well, do you have any hobbies perhaps? And you brought up two things. You said photography. We could have explored that more. And your other hobby is being a grandfather. By the way, what are you called? Are you grandpa?
I'm Papa.
Papa. That's what my dad's called. I like Papa. So as I said in the intro, early on, 22 months ago, we always started this show. In fact, it started only with trivia. And so I thought it would be fun to do a little bit, before we get into the serious topic of COVID, of 10 facts about grandparents that you didn't know.
Okay.
And maybe you did know them. Maybe you'd be interested to hear about them. So here we go. It's going to be halfway quiz, halfway. Let's get your answers on some of these topics. So the very first thing is, I'm just going to give this one as a fact because I think it's interesting. The average American, I don't know what the term average American is, but the average American will be a grandparent for how many years of their life? Can you take a guess? This is the top fact.
35.
It could be. Actually, what it says, I just realized is, oh, you were close actually. It's the average American will be a grandparent for half of his or her life. I would bet that that's going to change as people have kids older.
Yeah.
But I thought that was pretty interesting. The average American will be a grandparent for half of his or her life. That's pretty amazing. But this is how they figure it out. They say if 18 is considered to be the beginning of adulthood, the average person will live 30 years as an adult before becoming a grandparent. That's if you become a grandparent at 48, I think. This might be a little outdated. Since the average lifespan of the American is 78 years, the average person's also likely to be a grandparent for 30 years. Well, there you go. What do you think when polled that grandparents say is the most important role of being a grandparent?
Being supportive of their kids.
I like that answer. Now, what do you think potentially some people might say is seen as the number one role of a grandparent?
Financial support.
See, you're too smart. It's actually the fact is that most parents, I was going to say spoiling. I mean, that's how
Right.
I see grandparents are supposed to spoil their grandchildren. But there was an AARP survey. It basically is the answer is most grandparents don't see spoiling their grandchildren as their special role. An AARP survey, 37% said spoiling is part of the grandparent role, but but almost as many, 30%, said that no one, this is interesting, no one should spoil children. The
Why?
remaining respondents said that parents should spoil the children or that both grandparents and children should. Interesting.
Okay. Well, that
Let's see,
covers the waterfront.
Abby, thank you. Abby wrote in. She got me. She said, "Spoil the kids."
Spoil the
So there
kids.
you
Right.
go. Spoil the kids. What percentage of American children live out of 10? How many live with a grandparent?
Out of 10.
Out of 10, or percentage out of 100 if you want.
Oh, what percentage of grandparents? I'm sorry, say that again.
What percentage
Kids
of
with it.
children?
Right.
What percentage of children do you think, if you had to take a guess, live with their grandparent?
I
Either
would guess.
as yeah.
I would guess in these times, it's much higher. Um, Before these times, maybe 20%, 25%.
As of this poll, which I'm going to get the information and share later, it was actually 1 in 10. 1 in 10 actually live with a grandparent. I would agree with you that I think it's probably higher at this point of life
Yeah.
in our economy. um, we're going to do all of them, but there is a fact here that's interesting. It just says grandparents aren't sitting by their phone. Meaning that grandparents are saying we have stuff to do, we have myriad interests. I just thought that was interesting that this survey had to say. Today,
Well,
here's a good
grandparents
one.
today have real lives, right? Because we're younger, and
That's
and we do stuff, and many of us are still working either because we need to or we want to.
yeah,
So it's not. I'm not surprised by that.
yeah. I'm not surprised by it knowing my parents, but I think when I grew up, I thought my grandparents were always sitting by the phone waiting for me to call. I definitely had a grandmother who did that.
No.
This I do not think will surprise you. Today's grandparents spend more on their grandchildren than did their counterparts in the past.
No, there's no doubt that's true.
There's no doubt that's for true.
There's no doubt
Number
that.
number 7, I don't know that this is just a fact. Grandmothers outnumber grandfathers, but that could change. That's what this says.
That's ominous.
Apparently, the interesting fact about this one is it was always said that women outlived men, but apparently that trend is evening out, and that before 2020, it says that is by 2020 it was supposed to drop significantly and even out more. So there you go. Grandparents and grandmothers and grandfathers are living as long.
I think they're all living longer, and as we all live longer, maybe that balances. I think that's a good thing.
I think that's a good thing. I mean, more time with the people you love for sure. Grandchildren, this is number 8. I don't know if this is getting better or worse. Grandchildren often see their grandparents as having closed minds.
Ooh,
I don't like that one.
I don't like
But
that
it
one.
is. No, I don't like that one, but it is from a Pew Research Center report. So, Julian, you're going to have to change that trend.
I've got an open mind as long as you agree with me.
Bum. Okay. What percentage? This is also not going to surprise you. The fact is, about blank percent of grandparents care for their grandchildren while their parents are working.
I
About
would
percent.
I would say it's a big number, maybe 30%.
Let's see if we can get any people that are watching to write in some guesses. So, what percentage of grandparents care for the grandchildren while the parents are working? I'm going to give it a second while I share fact number 10, because I like this fact more. Modern grandparents are, well, modern. That is fact number 10. Thank you. Pamela Bennett says 25. Noelle says 20%. Julian, what did you say? 30%? Sharon Bobgold, 25%.
I said 30%. This is sort of like The Price is Right, I think.
Exactly. Except for you don't win $1 million or whatever you win there. Yeah. But to go back to number 10, and then I'll share the answer. Modern grandparents are modern. It says according to grandparents.com, 75% of grandparents are online, and that percentage is continually rising. However, only 10% of grandparents sport a tattoo. No word on whether that figure is going up or down.
And I'm not going to comment on that at all.
Okay, fantastic. All right, so in order to finish this trivia section and get to COVID, but doesn't that percentage depend on the culture or economics of the community? Number one, I completed, right, Julian? It must, right?
Yeah, sure, of course.
For sure. But the AARP report says 15%.
Ooh.
You all guessed a little high.
A little high. Wow.
So that means about 1 in 6.5
right.
grandparents care for their grandchildren. I still think that's pretty high.
Yeah, I don't know. I would have thought it was higher. Anyway.
There you go.
It is what it is.
It is what it is. All right. So now we will take a deep breath and we will get to the reason that we are here tonight. I want to remind everybody that Julian and I will have a conversation. You're more than welcome to put your questions into the chat. We remind everyone to please be cordial and, just know that everybody can see your comments. But I know you guys are a wonderful crowd. And we're going to try and save the questions for the end so that we can get through the talking points that we want to get through. So here we go. Julian, Dr. Gold, I'm going to turn myself off as you start to talk in a second. How did we get here? How did we get to January 2022 and we're still talking about COVID?
Right. That's a great question. We're living in a moment in time. So over the course of time, diseases have afflicted mankind. That's not a new thing. And for most of us, we got to our adult years where we kind of knew what the disease was. We kind of knew what the treatment was. It wasn't all that complicated, or maybe it was difficult, but there was a set course of how we're going to manage this. And that's true for the simplest diseases and the most complicated diseases. This was a brand new disease. When it first came, it was called a novel virus. And the reason it was a novel virus, novel is exactly that, brand new. Something we haven't seen. And because of that, we're living through this. The history for all these other diseases, others have lived through that history. This is our time to live through the history of a disease, and we're living through the history of this novel coronavirus or COVID-19. And so nobody knows what it is, right? Nobody's seen it before. There is no answer to how does this progress. We just sort of live with it day by day. And it's not surprising. I mean, viruses mutate, all organisms mutate. It's Darwinism, right? Survival of the fittest. And bugs, in their broadest term, not the insect type, but those two, they mutate, and that's what happened here. So there was no textbook for this. We knew that one day, and in fact, there's a famous now TED Talk by Bill Gates just 4 or 5 years ago that basically says this will happen, and he sort of outlines the steps we ought to take to get ahead of it. And of course, we didn't do it. But the fact that this now happens, we never knew when, but we knew it would, right? It was sure that we would. So what's happened with that? It's complicated because we're living in a time of instant communication or near instant, tons of data, some of it real, some of it not. Everybody's got an opinion. Some of it is right and some of it is not. And without the true answer to the question, there's this space where people can make up what they want if they choose to. The medical establishment was faced with a real dilemma. On the one hand, trying to fix this, right? Trying to find the cure, understand it, really develop cures, develop prophylaxis, vaccines, things like that. And on the other hand, to communicate with the community what's going on in a way that the community would understand and accept. And unfortunately, what happens is in this super transparent world, on today, we're going to say, here's what we think is happening. And we'll say that because it is. But tomorrow, something will happen and it changes that. All of a sudden, it's not exactly what we thought it was. It was a little bit different. And so tomorrow, we're going to say, well, here's what we think is happening. And invariably, people come to us and say, but yesterday, you said it was something else. Well, that's actually what we thought it was yesterday. Today, we think it's this. It's not that there's this suspicion that people are hiding things, or it's none of that. We're sort of telling you what our best thinking today is, but it changes as this disease evolves and as our knowledge increases. Everything changes. And so at any moment in time, you ask for someone's opinion, you're going to get the best opinion for that moment in time. And that's what happens when you live through this sort of pandemic, this sort of transition. It's hard. There's no doubt. It's hard. It's emotionally hard. It's medically hard. It's hard on many, many levels, but it's not like we have a choice. And so here we are. And we're in a better place today than we were 2 years ago, but we're not done.
I think what really stood out to me when we spoke was that today's world, everyone really wants transparency. And as you said, they want transparency. If you think of the mask issue, we talked about that. And the recommendation to not wear masks, the recommendation to wear masks. And it was just there were so many factors going into that decision. I just want to recommend there's definitely some documentaries out there that give some of this background, but at the end, I'll recommend them. I don't want to get political about it.
Well, and that's the other piece of this that you do have to acknowledge. And unfortunately, it's true. And I'm not pointing fingers at anybody, but what should be a scientific discussion has gotten dramatically politicized. And there's a role for politics in the world. I'm the first one to say that because I live in that world. But
right.
This is not that. This is, it's like Jack Webb in what was that TV program back in the 50s? He was Sergeant Friday, and he would say, "Just the facts, ma'am." Right? All he wants are the facts. And that's really, the scientific view of the world is just tell me the facts. Take out all the noise and tell me the facts. And so we kind of get down a rabbit hole here for a lot of noise that confused what may have been the fact, and the facts weren't clear. So we had competing facts. We had, it's been very messy. And
if it's not too political to say, which I don't think it is, which is that even if the fact had been for everybody's safety, everybody needs to wear a mask from day one, we didn't have the mask just sitting in everybody's homes like we might have in the future.
Right. Absolutely.
Right?
Not only that, I mean, even the conversation of what kind of mask, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know what your mask collection looks like. I have some very pretty cloth ones that I'm told I
It
can't
has
wear
changed.
anymore. You know?
Exactly.
And I have 100 million hospital masks. Not true. I'm kidding. But I lived in those for most of my life, and now,
Yep.
of course, this conversation about N95 or KN95, whatever, it changes. This is the evolution of knowledge, and we're subject to it.
I do have to say, behind the scenes, my mom reminded me the show you're thinking of is Dragnet.
Thank you,
Just the
Dragnet.
facts. Thank you, Marilyn Weiss.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Dragnet. I'm betraying my
Dragnet.
age. Just
So
the
can you
facts,
give
man.
us, as you said, exactly, as you said, um, this was known as a novel virus. It's not a completely new virus in our world. So can
Right.
you give us a little bit of the history, not a full, but just a little bit of what this came from,
Well,
this
there is
virus?
a so I'm going to take a sideways step on this and just say, why is it that we were able to create vaccines as quickly as we could, right?
Mhm.
And it speaks directly to your question, which is we've known this category of disease for decades, for at least a decade, maybe more. And we had engineered the basic mechanism for attacking this kind of disease, the coronavirus, right? This was a novel coronavirus called SARS-CoV-19. But so this class of virus we've known, and researchers have been working for a long time to develop technologies to combat it. And so when this appeared, this is so so part of the reason I'm going to again go sideways the other way. Um, all viruses mutate, right? All organisms mutate. All viruses mutate. It's the reason we have variants. The anticipation was that one of these coronaviruses would mutate and would become something we had to deal with. And that, in fact, happened novel coronavirus. Um, so that technology existed. Everybody knew it was going to happen. They just didn't know where or when or whatever. So it's not a surprise. And the fact that we've been through, where we started and then Delta and Omicron, and if you believe it, Omicron 2, and Lord knows what comes after that, also should not be a surprise. We are the organism, we are the host to the virus, right? And if you get infected with this virus, if you get infected with the flu virus or cold virus or anything else, you're effectively the petri dish, right? All these viruses are growing in you. That's why you get sick. And viruses just keep going. They mutate. Most mutations die. They're not viable, and they die. Every once in a while, there's a mutation that takes hold, and every once, even more than that, or less than that, there's a mutation that is stronger than the original, and it becomes dominant. And that's what happened with Delta and now Omicron. Now, the good news, of course, is that Omicron, although it's much more infective, it appears that its impact is much less dramatic. It's less dramatic for several reasons. The first, of course, is, well, by its nature, it's probably less dramatic. It appears to attack the lungs less. But we have a large part of the population that's immunized. And immunization impacts your ability to fight this, even the variants. And so, what we've seen as the impact of Omicron has been large numbers of people who've been infected. And by the way, some part of that is distorted by the fact that we're doing so much testing, right? Our level of testing is so much higher. But we're recording large numbers of people who are infected, but the numbers of people who are really getting dramatically ill are fewer, considerably. And of course, the mortality rate is less. And it should be said too that those who are not vaccinated have disproportionately suffered the impacts of all of this, including Omicron.
Absolutely. I think what I keep questioning that. I listen to The Daily, which is a podcast based on a New York Times editorial every day. And just this morning, they said the chances of getting in a car crash, the chances of so many things that are so much higher than getting COVID. I think that what is scary for the average American today is that you just don't know if you're going to be that person who ends up on a respirator. And I think that's been the scariest part of trying to wake up every day and tiptoe through through this atmosphere that's so unknown to us. Is that, in so many ways we could say, all right, God forbid I get the flu, I'm going to be sick for a couple days. But even vaccinated, even if you get just Omicron, where there's this talk in our, and I'll just say it, on television and in our culture, that you could be the one out of 100 who gets it worse than someone else. So I would say to you, like, how do we move forward? How do we step into the future and get past some of the fears and the PTSD of 2020, 2021, et cetera?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think that your analogies to being in an auto accident or getting struck by lightning or any of those things, those are things you come to terms with, right? Otherwise, you'd never get in an automobile. You wouldn't walk on the street. You could get hit and all that kind of stuff. If you actually take a look, so recognize we sort of have, in my mind, we've got two phases of this. This disease, when it started, was awful. I mean, we have all of those awful images, in Italy and New York and Chicago and Florida. We have all those awful images of thousands, millions of people who died, right? Certainly tens of thousands. And the mortality rate of this disease in the early time was very high. It approached 10% in certain places. There's virtually nothing we've seen that has a 10% mortality. It's staggering. But what we've seen over time is that that mortality rate has dropped dramatically. What happened was, in that early stage where we didn't know what this was, we had no idea how to treat it, where nobody was vaccinated. Unfortunately, the most vulnerable were the ones who got attacked by this. And we saw, really the nursing homes and other people with immune system illnesses, they were really dramatically impacted. Today, the mortality rate in Los Angeles County for COVID from the beginning until now is approximately 0.2%.
Wow.
0.2. And, some perspective locally, I think there are, I actually probably have it right here. I think that in Beverly Hills, we've had 36 deaths since the onset of COVID. And we probably had, I'm guessing, 34 a year ago. So in the last year, we've seen 2 or 3 that got added to that number. So as we've kind of recognized what this is, the impact of it has fallen dramatically. And imagine this. Imagine that Omicron. You know people with Omicron. We all know people. People you were with yesterday or last week or whatever. So imagine that Omicron. All you knew was Omicron as we knew it today, right? We did not have, as you said, the PTSD of the last 2 years of Omicron. Most of us would sort of shrug and say, okay, I guess there's a chance I could get really sick, but pretty much I'm just going to go about my life. Right. That's true of flu, right? The people, only about half, maybe less, people get vaccinated against flu, which is unfortunate because most people should. And the flu vaccine is a little different from this vaccine. But in the United States today, there are probably 50,000 people annually who die from flu.
Right.
It's not like it's a benign disease. And again, very similar in that it impacts those who are immune suppressed, those who are elderly, those who are vulnerable because of medications they take and things like that. So I think that's where we have to get, right? This has to, Omicron or COVID will not go away. There's not a magic pill. There's not a moment in time. We're not going to be able to say, New Year's Eve 2023, it's over. Not going to happen. We're going to live with this in some form, shape, or manner going forward for a while. And it's going to change our lives a little bit, but we're going to have to live our lives, right? Um,
Absolutely.
we're going to have to learn how to live our lives, whether you carry a mask, whether you get a vaccination every year, whether whatever it happens to be. We'll take whatever precautions we need to minimize our risk and try and keep ourselves safe. But we're going to have to come to terms with it and live with it.
Yeah, I think one thing that I'm trying to remind myself of to calm my nerves down is that we have these new pills, these new treatments that we didn't have 2 years ago.
Right.
And that drastically changes, I hope, the fear that people have of getting it in the future. It's just that hopefully our hospitals will know how to treat it.
Right. And just to spend a minute on that, or maybe a little bit more, because I think that's very important to say, Cantor.
Mm-hmm.
There are at least three different categories of medications that relate to this. The first, of course, the one we spent the most time always talking about has been vaccination. Because
Absolutely.
vaccination does offer potentially protection, maybe not immunity. You know, you may not be in a tower, but at least protection that if you do get it, it'll be a milder disease. So too for flu, by the way. That's the thinking around flu.
Absolutely.
Anybody who thinks that the vaccines were created to cure the disease and make it go away forever is wrong. That was never the intent, and it was never going to happen. The second thing that, of course, has come along have been this whole bucket of monoclonal antibodies, where we now have therapies that can be given to people to help them if they're really, really sick with the disease, where their immune system isn't supported sufficiently. And this will, in effect, augment their own immune system with these monoclonal antibodies. And there are more and more of those. In fact, um, I think Pfizer is coming out with one called EvuShield. And these are things that will change the way that I think we manage the disease. Lastly, there are drugs out there now, both from Pfizer and Merck and others, which are antivirals. And just like people would take Tamiflu for when they thought they were getting the flu, we're
Right.
going to be in a place where we'll be able to take one of these in the first 4 or 5 days, and I think that it may mitigate it. So we're working to a time where we're going to be able to manage this thing much better because now we understand it, and all of this stuff has developed over the last 2 years, and we're obviously in a much better place than we were a couple of years ago.
Thank goodness. So Roy is kind of giving us a kick in the butt, which we needed, because what part two of this conversation absolutely was, it is unique that you are a doctor with a different understanding of the medical needs, and also serve our city council. I don't want to forget to say, and I might, to say that Julian is a member of our reopening committee, which has met throughout this pandemic to discuss what the best opening restrictions and opening rules there could be at Temple Emanuel. So if you wouldn't mind saying, before we go into Roy's questions about city council, I just want to make sure to get it out there to tell everyone. I'll let you make the announcement about what's going to happen at Temple.
Well,
Um,
again, thank you, Cantor, for that. We met this afternoon, and I think the decision is that we're going to reopen slowly. That people who have had the booster, who have come with a N95, or we'll give you an N95 or equivalent, We're going to separate people. We're going to limit the number of people in a room, maybe to 30 households at a time. That in that sort of controlled setting, we should be able to restart in person in this next little bit. And hopefully, what we're watching is the reported rates of infection across the county, and they're starting to come down. And if it continues, if we see this continued decline in the number of people infected, then over the next little bit, we'll liberalize it even more. But these seem to be reasonable and safe recommendations in this time frame as the incidence of COVID seems to be declining.
Fantastic. So everybody can definitely join us February 4th for Shabbat Unplugged in person. Not everybody, but
30
if you're
households.
vaccinated boosted, 30 households.
30
I will
households.
be very excited. Please do show up because we love feeling the warmth of having people there after so long. So let's move on. And by the way, everybody, you will receive a letter from the temple giving those restrictions and just everything, really outlining the decisions that were made. One more thing, because Rabbi Aaron behind the scenes is giving me some jokes here. He says, "Why do the viruses have to be given Greek names? Why weren't they given, biblical names like the Samson virus, the Abraham flu, or the Elijah variant?" Now we need a ba-dum-ba. I don't know that we have time to answer that, but I did shout out to
It's
Rabbi
above my
Aaron.
pay grade anyway. I can't even guess.
Someone will have to answer. I'm going to read the questions, but let's transition to the city of Beverly Hills and COVID and what you can talk about there.
Sure. So we could probably take the next hour and talk about that, but
We will not. But yes.
we will not do that. The city had many of the same issues the medical community did, right? I mean, there's limited and conflicting information. The rules are, just so you know, that for all things we do, all things a city does, the rules, and this is true of traffic laws, and it's true of you take your pick. The state sets the threshold, and a county can make things stricter, but not less strict. And so too, a city can make things stricter, but not less strict. So our ability to change things, the only thing we really could do was to make things stricter. In the beginning, we were a little bit ahead of the county and the state for that matter. And we made an early decision about masks and closing the city down and things like that. That was an early decision that the council made. But within a week, LA County was there. And so everybody was kind of now moving in the same direction. The problem when you make rules that are different from the county is you got to fix them when you go in the other direction. And so it took us a little time to do that on the way back. But in the end, we really decided that it made the most sense if we stuck with the county rules. And there are a lot of reasons for that. It's not because we think the county is wonderful. I mean, sometimes they are. It's not, or perfect, a better word. But they had all of the information. They were putting out all of these things, and we live in an environment where across the street from Beverly Hills is LA, or is West Hollywood, and there needed to be a consistency because, and I saw that Roy said Anna said something about the inconsistencies here. I agree with you. The inconsistencies in the messaging made people crazy. There was no doubt that the inconsistencies in the messaging made people crazy. And I think we saw that. It took us a little time to figure it out, but we saw that. And in order to try and diminish those inconsistencies, we finally said, okay, we'll live with what the county is saying because everybody in the county is going to be doing it. I think lesson learned. Sometimes the enemy of good is perfect. I don't know that we were perfect, but I think that in trying to sort of be more aggressive than the county, we probably didn't do anybody a service, and something I would certainly resist if we were ever to be in that position again. As to the discrepancies, I see some questions about the discrepancies about amongst the professionals. Well, you know what? That always happens, and you know, you can adjudicate those sometimes, and sometimes you can't. But there's nothing
Did you
much
see
we
the
can do.
end of her? If you saw the end of the question, though, the very last part of Anna's question is: should these news alerts be critically reviewed before they appear on prime time?
Yeah. Well, first off, if primetime references the media, the traditional media, we have no control over that. The
Right.
media has its own agenda, and information may or may not be part of it. But and we certainly have no ability to influence really what they say. Now, there are certain people who are connected to the media. David Agus is a point, Dr. David Agus, who I think did a really good job in educating. He's a USC doc and helped us as part of our task force. I think he did a really good job in kind of keeping everybody informed, and his opinions, I think, ultimately came to be true. But he wasn't the only one who got interviewed, and there was nobody to say, well, he was right and somebody else was wrong. And I just think that's, it's really hard, and it's actually it's impossible in real time. As
Absolutely.
to the business impact, I see some questions about the
Yeah.
economic impact. Um, it depends on the segment of the city you're talking about. Obviously, everybody took a hit, but certain elements, certain businesses in the city took a huge hit, mostly hospitality, and in particular the hotels, where in the beginning of this, our hotels had occupancies that were in single digit numbers, less than 10%. That was a reflection of nobody traveling, the fear factor and all the rest. We work with our hotels. Some of our hotels actually we work with so that in order to help them, but to help us, they would house some of our first responders because many of our first responders live far away and they were traveling and they were working long shifts. And so the hotels would provide at a de minimis amount of money the opportunity for them to stay there, especially since we were working shifts that kind of followed each other and they didn't have the time to travel. The other thing that's true, the Hilton, for instance, helped us in
Mhm.
because we have a program that feeds our seniors. It comes out of Roxbury Park. And up until COVID, they would come there, we'd feed lunch, and they could socialize. Once this all started, that didn't happen. So they created meals. We delivered meals to hundreds of our seniors who were locked in and who otherwise didn't have food and would have come. So there was a lot of stuff that was happening in the background where we can try and find partnerships between our businesses and the city to get us through this. Um, I think that uh, the city again, the city, um, the eviction moratorium was mandated by the state. Actually, ultimately, even the feds. Those sorts of things. The PPP money that came out of the federal government. All of that was stuff that we were supportive of, but we didn't have any real control over. Um, it was a tough time for everybody. The
Yeah.
city managed its budget by we cut our budget. We cut our labor force. We offered early retirement to those who were eligible and other incentives for some who would otherwise leave early in an effort to reduce the city budget. We actually suspended business tax for a while to help those businesses that obviously couldn't afford it. Uh, while we thought that was the right thing to do for the business, it obviously has an impact on the city's budget also. We're fortunate in the city that we have a rainy day fund, we have big reserves. We've been very, very prudent, I think, with our money. And so we were able to we were able to okay, we were able to weather this by dipping into our reserve funds. We will have to replenish them when things get better, but that's what they're there for. So we're fortunate that we did that. But it was and it is a hard time, and there's nobody who believes we're done with
Absolutely.
this.
I'm sorry for everyone.
Did I lose you there,
Right.
Lizzie?
I'm sorry. I want to just refresh for a second because yeah, we've been losing you a teeny bit there. Let's just give it a second. I think it might be better now. Let's see. Let's see. You're frozen. I can hear you, but you're
can
frozen.
move.
Oh, it looks like we're better now. Okay. So, I mean, thank you. Please, anyone, if you have a few more questions, I know maybe it's just me, but let me know, everyone, if you can hear Julian. It went out for me and it's frozen.
Oh, okay.
Here, hold on a second. Let's see. Let's see. Let me get in this question that I want to ask, which is that we've talked about the impact on Beverly Hills. We've talked a little bit about the impact on the hospitals, and I just want to make sure that we don't leave tonight without asking personally how this has impacted you, and perhaps what has been the biggest struggle for you getting through the last 2 years. That is what I really want to make sure that I get answered. If you're there,
I'm here. Can you hear me?
it looks like you might be frozen.
No. Oh. Is it me or is it you?
You're there. You're there. Yeah, you're just frozen. You're just frozen.
Because I see me. How do I make it?
I think it's you. Let's see if I'm getting any responses. Because I see me. How about you can go back in, and in the meanwhile, I'll introduce what month's Think About It Thursday is, and you can come back in and go out and come back in. Okay. Hold on. Oh. People are saying that you can't hear me. Can you hear me? Go ahead and write in can you hear me, everyone? I can't hear Julian. Julian's gone. Okay. I don't know what happened here. 1 second. Lovely. You can hear both. Okay. All right. I can't turn Julian off or anything. It is my internet. Hold on 1 second, everyone. Let's just give it a second to refresh. Let's see. It's my internet. Oy, oy, oy. Let's see. Should be okay. Can you hear me? I'm going to refresh this. Okay. Let's see. All right. If you can hear me, there we go. I think it was me, but I think we're back.
We're back.
And I hear the echo all of a sudden. Let's see if we're still. It looks like everybody else is still on. Go ahead and change it. I'm going to introduce next month's really quick. Next month's Think About It Thursdays, and then we'll come back and answer the question that I was trying to ask. So you can change the mic. So I just want to say again, let's see. I see you both. I hear you both. Thank you. Thank you, Sonia, Pamela. Anna, Robert, thank you guys for joining and for being here. We're sorry about that. Internet, I think, just went out. But I'm glad that you guys are here. So really quick, I just want to say that next month, we're going to be doing these Think About It Thursdays, the last Thursday of every month. And you might see a familiar face next month. We will have Lauren Croft here to talk about something that is very important, which is the social media transparency. She works for ADL, understanding ADL's campaign, Stop Hiding Hate, and the bill covering social media transparency. This is one of the most important just topics of our time. Oops, there's Julian. There we go. So it's one of the most important topics of our time, as specifically our children are living online, and it is just an effort to keep social media companies transparent. So I'm very excited to have Lauren here February 24th. I'll show it one more time. There you go. Oh, there's Julian. Sorry. Here's Lauren. So there you go. It has a date, February 24th at 7 p.m. Please join us. But Julian, as we close off this session, what I was trying to ask, and it was not behaving, was what has been the most challenging for you in the last 2 years? You've talked so much about the impact on Beverly Hills and on the hospitals. We talked about humanity, but what about personally?
Well, so we train, right? I spent a large part of my life training to take care of people. That's kind of what we do. And I don't. There was no part of there was nothing ever that prepared me for this. For sort of the widespread suffering and the amount of illness is just nothing. I never ever imagined in my lifetime that I would be witness to or participate in any way this sort of global pandemic. I guess that's probably not a surprise, but I as I thought about my career way back when, most of what we do, we take care of a patient at a time. But this is just something that is so far beyond anything that I ever would have conceived of. I mean, imagine nightmares. Hopefully we're at the other end. Hopefully there is light at the end of this tunnel. But I have to say that, certainly as a person and as a practicing physician, just the impact of this, the global impact of this is devastating. It's unbelievable, really remarkable.
We can only thank people like you for helping to keep our city safe, our temple safe, for helping us sort out the confusion that people have been speaking about, and to say thank you as a resident of Beverly Hills, as a patient of Cedars-Sinai, and as the Cantor at Temple Emanuel. Thank you for bringing all of your expertise into helping us get through this probably worst 2 years of many people's lives. Just want to thank you.
Hopefully that's today. Cantor, thank you. Thank you for doing this.
Absolutely.
Thank you for being
here. Thank you.
I'm here to help if you need me.
Thank you. And everybody, I'm sure, is saying thank you too. So thank you to everybody. This is Think About It Thursdays from Temple Emanuel, Beverly Hills, and I look forward to seeing you next month, February 24th, with Lauren Croft about social media transparency. We will see you then. Thank you again for attending. Bye.
Thanks.